Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.
Welcome into Over the Line Extra. It's Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh with you for the next little while as we look back on the Connacht football final and look ahead to the Leinster hurling final. Will there or won't be another handshake, Sean? That's what everybody's wondering.
I think there will.
Or will there be fisticuffs? Or is there too much being made of it?
I think there's too much being made of it, but it is going to be a factor. I mean, you would have thought that after the day in Salt Hill, if it had been handled slightly better than it had been, it wouldn't be an issue now. But anyway, look at it.
Over to you, Mr. Cody. But
Absolutely.
first, let's go big ball, and we're looking back on the Connacht football final and Galway's victory over Roscommon last Sunday. And we're delighted to be joined on Over the Line Extra by former Mayo footballer John Casey, who was working at that game. John, thanks a million for joining us. Were you impressed with Galway first and foremost?
100%. Thought they were full value for their win. And looking at the game and watching the game, you would expect it, I suppose, at the end though, for them to be a little bit more comfortable than they actually were. And that's, look, I'm nitpicking here when I'm saying, that's a little bit of a worry going forward for them. The concession at 2-16 after dominating a game for so long, I suppose. But what ultimately won Galway the game was how clinical they were in front of the post. Like, Roscommon ended up actually having a couple of shots more than Galway, but Galway kind of made hay when the sun was shining and they justifiably won the game. But on the day, their full forward line were virtually unmarkable, and that was the line that was very impressive. And Roscommon had no answer to what the lads brought to the game on Sunday. But as I mentioned, going forward, for Galway, Pádraig Joyce will need to be wondering. Kickouts weren't great. They lost 10 of their own kickouts. I think they won 17 from 27 kickouts from Conor Gleeson. But their conversion rate from their chances was what ultimately won them the game. But, Walsh was absolutely brilliant. On the radio, I suppose, with the Fat Larry connection and Mayo, I gave the man of the match to Robert Finnerty. But when I watched the game back, Shane Walsh had a special afternoon, really. But Finnerty's contribution cannot be underestimated. 5 from play, and he had a proper hand to play in both Galway goals. His shot that came back off the post, which was brilliantly double dummied by Shane Walsh and finished. The Shane Walsh goal, I should say, with the ball that came back off the post was finished by Patrick Kelly. But for Shane Walsh's goal, it was Finnerty that won a dirty ball in the top right-hand corner in Salt Hill. And if he hadn't won that, there would have been no Shane Walsh. Brilliant double dummy, as I mentioned. But ultimately, all over, Galway deserved the win. But the concession at 2-16, and the last 2 times they played Roscommon in the league final and in the league in Hyde Park, they conceded 120 in both of them games. So that's something that Pádraig Joyce, I think, will probably have to be looking to going forward again, especially in the All-Ireland quarter-final.
Yeah, the one thing you'd have to ask though, John, in your opinion, because you saw Castlebar as well, are Galway better now than they were in Castlebar against Mayo going into an All-Ireland series?
I absolutely think so. They'll have got the confidence. Monkey off the back, if you want. Like PJ, let's not forget, it was under a little bit of pressure on Sunday. Galway had to deliver. I'd say there would have been a lot of question marks had he not won that game. And I was personally, as he's a good friend of mine, I was absolutely delighted for him. But there would have been question marks. I don't know, did I hear somebody mention it was the 1800s, the last time Galway lost 4 Connacht finals in a row. So that was a big one to get off. And the last 2 games they played in Connacht finals against Roscommon in 17 and 19, they lost both of them, of course. So it was time for Galway to get some silverware, time for PJ to get some silverware. But to answer your question, the big one for them was Mayo. Roscommon were never going to be a walkover by any stretch of the imagination, and went into that game probably full of confidence after beating them in the league final. But once Galway got the Mayo thing out of the way, they could focus solely, with no disrespect to the other, to Leitrim, that they could get the focus on Roscommon. And that was something that I suppose that they would have been planning from a long way out after that league final. But, they were 6 up, let's not forget, in Castlebar and Cruise. And I actually had Pádraig Joyce nearly sent a text message with 10 minutes to go of the game in Castlebar to say, congrats, I'm out of here. And then all of a sudden I'm on the edge of my seat in injury time. And Mayo had a chance. Aidan Orme, I think, had a chance to level it. Like, that would have been robbery from a Mayo perspective. Now, the same thing could have nearly happened in Salt Hill last Sunday. Galway, Cruise and home and hose. And if that game went on a bit longer, I'd say there could have been, as Fergie put, the squeaky bum time in Salt Hill for the last couple of minutes. But Roscommon ultimately didn't get that chance to get the leveller. But that's just something that they'll probably try to address, because you can't Galway packed their defence. At stages, they had the 15 inside the 45, and it was like, what we have, we hold. But what was impressive for me about them was the way they counter-attacked, and felt Roscommon were a little bit naive. They had nobody sitting there, and I just remember, I think it was one of Damien Comer's points in the second half, that it was actually Comer and Rob Finnerty that dispossessed one of the Roscommon players on their own 45, and Galway broke like a train, and Comer could have gone left or right or whatever way he wanted, but he elected, I think he gave one pass and received a return to kick it over the bar. But I was a little bit wondering why there wasn't little bit of Roscommon cover there to stop that, but Galway were massively impressive going forward. And again, you mentioned the three full forward line. Killian McDade, I thought, put in a really good shift in the middle of the field as well. I was loved watching him off the ball. He was grappling. I think Niall Kilroy came on there for Roscommon, and straight away McDade had a piece of him and they were rolling around the ground. But yeah, ultimately impressed with Galway. And to answer your question, they do look better. They look better up front, most definitely. But the little worry is the concession of them big scores. And you just wonder, and I know we're talking way down the line here, what the likes of a Kerry forward line or a Dublin forward might do to that defence. But then again, Kerry and Dublin look right now that they'll be able to destroy absolutely any defence.
And mentioning that, John, you're talking about Kerry and Dublin, there's a little bit of excitement now generating here in Galway this week, because when people begin to look at the possible path from now on for Galway, and also let's widen it, the path for your own native Mayo right now, there's probably not a possibility that the two of them will meet, but Galway are going to veer clear, looking like right now, of Dublin and Kerry.
Yeah, well, that's a huge bonus, really, straight away. I'm not going to tell you a lie. I'm just worrying about Saturday and seeing can we get over the line. I haven't looked at the permutations going forward. I just do know at semi-final stage, Leinster meet Munster, if I'm not mistaken, and Connacht are meeting Ulster. So you are right; they are avoiding those two from now on in, and that's a huge bonus. So after Derry, what Derry showed, I suppose, what an underdog is capable of doing. Underdogs in all their games, and now Ulster champions. So it is a kind of a year for maybe a surprise or two. Galway are going to be back in Croke Park again, and I personally can't wait, because I love to see good forwards flourishing in Croke Park. And when you see the likes of them lads going up there playing, I can't wait for it. But that is a huge incentive to know that they are going to be avoiding them. Our own fellas, playing against Galway, obviously there'll be no fear there, but Mayo have a lot of football to play before we even consider them to be in the same category. Like, we have a huge game against Monaghan, a game that for me is split middle, 50-50 down the middle, so we'll have to be worrying about that before we even contemplate playing any quarter-final.
Yeah, the big issue with Mayo, John, was the injuries. So any update there, and what's the mood in the camp like ahead of Monaghan?
Yeah, the rumour mill was an overdrive last week. I'm sure you heard them all. Between rumours of players walking from panels and injuries and whatnot. But yeah, I think James Horn had to kind of quench the fires a little bit and called a media press conference for the Mayo media last week to try and spell any of the rumours, if they are rumours or what they were. But yeah, I understand that a lot of players have missed a lot of training between the Galway game and next Saturday. I don't know how true that is, because unfortunately, Ollie, that's what we have to do. We have to kind of rely on rumours and third word. We don't really get anything massively official. If James Horn, what he said last week, then Ryan O'Donoghue was the only one. Well, we know Michael Plunkett obviously got hurt and he's definitely out, but we heard Ryan O'Donoghue had been carrying a little. But I heard there's a few more than him that haven't been training up to speed. So we won't know. We will not have a clue until, is it 4 p.m. on Saturday evening, exactly what players, because they keep everything, as we well know, in-house. Nothing is known. There's no crumbs of information coming from anywhere. So I was just told by a person yesterday that they know that a good few players have missed a good bit of training between the Galway game and Saturday. So we'll have to wait and see. And we can't forget, like, Jordan Flynn missed that Galway game. He's become a vital part of our setup in the middle of the field. I heard he hasn't trained a whole lot and probably not enough to start against Monaghan. Paddy Durkin didn't start against Galway. We have no idea his status. The same for Robbie Hinnelly, who's Rory Byrne has covered admirably in goals for him, but it's the long distance frees that Hinnelly would badly be missed from. Killian, I heard, hasn't trained as much as he could have. So again, we're working on rumours here, so we have no idea what team's going to take the field. But you can be sure of one thing: when Banty, McEnany, and then Monaghan fellas arrive in town, Mayo will need to be up for it, because they also have the Donny Buckley factor needs to be considered here as well. Donny Buckley is now, of course, is coach in Monaghan, and he is worked with all these Mayo players, knows them inside out, and he will have an absolute plan in place to thwart all Mayo's positive. If Paddy Durkin is playing, you can be sure he'll have somebody sitting there waiting as a direct way to stop him, to stop Aidan O'Shea bulking around the place if Killian is playing. So it's a very interesting game, and it's one that it's very hard to call. I didn't bother checking bookmakers to see what they think of it or what they might think happened, but for me, it's an absolutely 50-50 game. The positive thing is it's at home from Mayo. We always bring a huge support, as you well know, and I think that's going to be vitally important on Saturday evening. But yeah, look at here, we won't certainly look past it.
John, thanks a million for joining us. Great to give us your time.
Thanks,
no
John.
problem. Very welcome.
It's interesting to hear him, because that's one thing, and I wonder, is this the end of Horan if he loses on Saturday?
But even with that, I mean, and I suppose it's a whole different discussion. Inter-county squads now, while they are watertight, there has to be something in what he's saying, because those stories did come out last week. Obviously, there's not everyone he wanted has probably done enough work or whatever, but it's a huge game for Horan.
Well, there's no mention of
for Benty as well.
I mean, Oisin Mullen went off with a hamstring 6 weeks ago against Galway, so he's going to be very close to whether he'd be available to play or not, or if he starts, does he finish the game? As you say, something has to give between Banty or James Horan.
And Banty has Liam Sheedy, who our next guest will know well as well, from former Tipperary manager, in the background with Monaghan this year as well. So you can be sure that they are going to go at this series as well. But the one thing that I took...
What is it with all these hurling lads getting football jobs? Is there not enough jobs going around in the small ball?
Not at all. And look, sure, you have to spread the gospel is all you can do. But the other aspect you have to say is that, you remember Horan after the Galway defeat, he did deflect a lot of it, deflected some of it on the injuries and look into the 6 weeks to make up to get his team right again. So this is pressure, but now the only thing Mayo have history of doing enough in these qualifiers, haven't they? You get the impression if they could get over Saturday.
Correct. There's a lot of handy ones waiting.
There is, yeah. And that word momentum, they could take off, the crowd get behind them, get those lads back. So that's why next Saturday is the game.
They haven't gone away,
No.
But anyway, we'll move from Mayo, Monaghan and Galway, Roscommon. And we know that Galway and Roscommon, whatever happens, they'll be around in the championship after next weekend. Whether Mayo or not will be, time will tell. But next weekend, whatever happens, the two teams involved in the Leinster hurling final will have a big say in the knockout stages of the hurling championship, as Galway and Kilkenny meet yet again in a Leinster hurling final.
At 7 o'clock, which is a huge issue as well this week. It's a terrible time, particularly for Galway people. Families trying to get up, isn't it? I mean, and when you see last week, then the Dubs played their football game. Was it at 5 o'clock on the Saturday? Yeah. The Munster football final was played at 3 o'clock.
I know. Maybe we're making too much of it. Let's bring in Micheal Donoghue, the former All-Ireland winning Galway hurling manager, who joins us as well, and just to see, is that even going to be any sort of a topic of conversation for the Galway supporters as they make their way to Croke Park on Saturday for the big game. Micheal is incognito there. I know the price of electricity has gone up, Micheal, in recent times as well, so we can't actually visually see you. Either that or you're in the dark in Clarenbridge. But if you can hear us...
Can you hear me?
We can hear you perfectly.
We can definitely hear you, and maybe that's enough.
It's enough. I'm looking at G2 boys there now. You're like two altar boys sitting there.
Well, we're visualising you in your pyjamas. That's all we can say. That's why he won't...
I'm trying to get it going.
He won't give us the camera. Not to worry, Micheal. Give us your thoughts first and foremost, anyway, on the build-up to this Leinster final, which, from a national perspective, has been all about Cody and Shefflin and what might happen between them on the sideline.
Yeah, look, it's a huge talking point, isn't it? And similar to what we would have said before the first game, in that they it's probably going to be a lot made of it outside of the two teams, and I suppose with what happened the last day, a lot more focus and attention will be on it again this weekend. But I'm sure both of them just want to get on with the hurling.
And is it though, Micheal, is it a sideshow now because of what happened obviously in Salt Hill, and we can look at the venom that was in that handshake. If it was handled, I won't say better, but if it wasn't an issue coming out of Salt Hill, it wouldn't be an issue now. But it has lingered. I see Nicky Brennan, the former GA president, yesterday made a plea that the two of them just have the handshake before the game and kind of bury it or whatever.
Yeah, but I seen those comments, but like it's not, the GA isn't really in that, is it? It's not like soccer, where you go and embrace or meet the opposing manager. And I know Nicky suggested, but that hasn't a notion of happening, has it? And I think, the game is about opinions, isn't it? And like the amount of opinion and differing opinion from the handshake the last day has just been mental. And, there is going to be a lot of talk, and to see what reaction is after the game again on it. But, look, at this stage, both of them will just be focusing very much on the game and getting the performance and winning the Leinster final and getting a semi-final spot. That's the big objective for the weekend.
Injuries. We saw the Dublin game. There was a bit of attrition in terms of what Galway lost through injury during the course of the game. From what we're hearing, Pádraig Mannion looks like he's going to be okay. David Burke, a bit of doubt about him, a bit of doubt about Brian Concannon. And the flip side as well, Hugh Lawler in that Kilkenny game in Galway, Micheal picked up that hand injury, but there's a feeling in Kilkenny that he could be right as well. So some of these things could have a major impact, couldn't they?
Yeah, there is. And I suppose the biggest thing, Sean, is that, like, when you're getting to the business end of which the Leinster final is, you want your big players on the pitch. And, for both the lads you mentioned, both managers would be desperately looking and trying to get them boys fit for the weekend. When Davy went down, we commented on commentary like that he did look in a lot of distress, and thankfully it didn't seem to be as bad as first thought. And you can see the contribution that he's made over the last number of games, just with his experience, and it's just his in-game ability to read a game and be adverse to danger, and just his communication out in the pitch is top class. So you can just see the addition he has been over the last number of games for Galway, and he would be a huge miss if he were to miss next weekend, but hopefully he'll be able to tug out. And likewise for Kilkenny, I think Galway are going into the game where we can probably name 14 or 15 the team. The biggest advantage.
Look, Micheal,
it is. Yeah, the biggest advantage for Galway, from the last time we played Kilkenny, is that we have Conor Whelan back, and what a plus that's going to be. Versus if you look at Kilkenny, can we name their team? Normally or historically, when comfortably, you'd probably been able to name 14 of the team, whereas now, he has made a lot of changes over the last number of games. Hugh Lawler, who you mentioned, had picked up the hand injury. He'd be desperate for him to come back. So it'll be really interesting to see what position he takes. Will it be in his customary full-back position, or, he's well accustomed to playing centre-back with his club, so, he could very well...
He could.
Yeah, well, you wouldn't know it. You wouldn't know with him, and it's another interesting point to even say with Kilkenny. Like, he probably over the last number of years, once the team was named, that was it. For starters and positions. So even Brian and his management have left people guessing coming up to the games, particularly this season. So it'll just be interesting to see how they line out.
One thing about Cody, and I'll just put this to you, Micheal, he always seems to learn from the defeats to Galway, and he's suffered a few of them over the years, from the 0-1 semi, in particular in the games where you get a chance to play Galway a second time in the same championship season. So we can expect a Kilkenny backlash, because if Galway were to win this one on Saturday, it would probably hurt the most of all, given where Kilkenny would fancy themselves to be going into an All-Ireland series. So in terms of, we'll say, what Cody will have learned from Pearse Stadium, and let's face it, Galway deserved to win that game, what will he look to change on Saturday in Croke Park?
I think when you look at the game, Ollie, it started with a great intensity, but I thought maybe from the second quarter on, Galway put Kilkenny under ferocious pressure with their work rate and turnovers. Like, I think we got, I think around 111 from turnovers, or our reward from turnovers was absolutely huge. And when you think about a Kilkenny team, you always associate them with a huge work rate. And, I think that's what Galway and other teams have managed over recent times, is that they've met that work rate and surpassed it. And if you do that, you're in with a good chance. I think from the game in Pear Stadium, that will be to the fore of his mind. And I also think that, they did concede a lot on turnovers. Even say Owen Murphy, who I regard one of the top keepers in the country, probably got caught going short, and Galway intercepted and got the reward on the scoreboard as well on it. So it'll just be interesting to see where they go. And even if you reflect on their last game against Dublin, and the commentary maybe on Kilkenny over the last few seasons is, where they're trying to adapt their game maybe to going through the lines more, versus where historically they would have just gone long probably and winning your own ball and then creating the runs off when they're in possession. So, you can see there's probably a transition in their own game. So they probably got a bit of criticism after the last game to the way they played, that they went back to the more direct route and they didn't get many rewards out of it. So it'll be just interesting to see what way they approach the game at the weekend.
I suppose the goals is an interesting point, Micheal, because both teams have actually conceded 4 goals in the championship. Kilkenny, though, have hit 14 goals. They always seem to go for the jugular. Galway have scored 7. But go back to the concession of the goals. 3 of the 4 Galway goals conceded in the championship came against Kilkenny, and you would argue that probably 2 of them were, when Galway look back on the tape of the game, they would not have been happy with. So is stopping Kilkenny getting goals going to be huge on Saturday night?
It is, yeah. And, Owen Cody was really good in Galway, but, Jack Grealish did well on him again. So it'll be interesting to see what matchup.
Would they go with Jack again, or would they go with Darren?
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised, Sean, if they did. In fairness to Jack, he's had a real solid year this year, and especially when he's been tasked to mark probably the marquee forward on the opposition team. So he's done really well. He's great pace, so I'd imagine he would. But when you look at Owen Cody, how his career has developed over the last few years, like we go back to that unbelievable club game against Thomas's down in Thurles. Do you know what I mean? Like he's really taken so much responsibility now in that Kilkenny attack, where normally would have associated with the likes of Richie Hogan and probably more recently TJ Reid. So he's taken on the mantle of nearly being their top forward. And Kilkenny this weekend would hoping that TJ gets back into right good form. And I think every team, at this stage, when you're getting to Croke Park, that's where you think your biggest performances will come. And but going back to your point on the goals, from a Galway perspective, you'd have to be really happy the way the defence is shaping up. They're looking really solid. They're working hard for each other, and hopefully that's a good foundation for us at the weekend.
The most important Kilkenny player, surely, since Shefflin has been TJ Reid. He was pretty much a non-event in Pearse Stadium. Surely Micheal will expect him back to full fitness and a far bigger threat. He won't be missing the frees like he did in Salt Hill, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's just a class player, Ollie. I know even say when I was involved, when you're looking, probably in recent years, he accounts for 50+% of their scores. So when you're playing against him, you're just going, right, if you can bring that down to low 40s, you're on it's a good stepping stone in the game. But it's just the caliber of player that he is. He's phenomenal, a phenomenal score getter and creator. And his aerial ability is second to none. And he's just epitomises what a Kilkenny player is with his work rate and attitude as well. And what a player he has been, a generational player. And one you love watching, but one you absolutely hate getting ready to play against.
And where do they place him now, out of curiosity? Would they put him inside? Would they put him on the 40?
I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they absolutely loaded the full forward line. Yeah. And see can they get it in there. But Mossy Keown, John Donnelly, they're hurling well as well. Will he play Walter wing forward because of his aerial ability? But I suppose the beauty of that, Sean, we're talking about them, and the flexibility that they have, that they can play nearly from midfield in, and that's the danger that they have, isn't it?
And the other thing is it's the Croke Park factor as well, isn't it? It's
There's the Croke Park factor, Sean, and there's the time of the game factor.
Yeah.
And evening hurling, it's an awful long day, Micheal, to pass the day and to stay right. So from a management point of view, what kind of problems does a 7 o'clock in the evening throw-in pose to you?
As you said, Ollie, it's just you're just waiting the whole day for it. And look, the lads will be used to playing evening games, but it's just the fact they'll have the routine. And I just always found, when you come together, no matter what time or where it is, you're in the zone. You know what I mean? So I just think it was a really, really bad call by Leinster Council to put it on at 7 o'clock. I thought it's totally unfair. And it's probably going to be reflective of the size of the crowd at the weekend, particularly on a bank holiday weekend. If you said it was on maybe at 5 o'clock, it would have just been, I know you spoke earlier about last week's game with Dublin. That was on around the 5 o'clock. I'm sure you would have got a better crowd going, but it's just of what time you're going to be home. And if you're bringing young lads, it's just a bit of a deterrent, isn't it?
And the cost of hotels. So people are not going to stay in Dublin. That's the issue.
No, not a notion, are they? So it's just, look, you just wonder sometimes who's running it, don't you? Or where the logic of 7 o'clock is.
We could spend a programme on that one. But look, let's broaden it as well. I suppose we're looking at Kilkenny being a little bit unsettled, Galway being very settled as of now. But the one thing that Galway have had in the last few weeks as well is the return of Ronan Glennon and Jason Flynn, who have got run-outs in the last 2 games. That's important as well because, whatever happens Saturday evening, if you lose, you end up in a quarter-final 2 weeks later. If you win, I think the whole world opens up for you because you end up in a semi-final in a month's time. But the likes of Flynn and Glennon coming back, we hear Sean Lennon is coming back from that cruciate as well, whether he's there yet to play at this level. But it's nice to have those guys back, isn't it? It's
huge, Sean, to have them back. And I think it's really important to stress, though, as well, like that, when you're looking at the squad in its entirety right now, there's a lot of young fellas there, a lot of lads that are maybe just their first or second year on the squad, and we are probably going through a transition. Maybe it's not reflective on our first 15, but in the bigger context, we are in that transition. So there's a lot of learnings for those young fellas. But when you go to the bench or you have to go to the bench, it's great that you have the likes of Jason. He had a really bad injury. He's come back, but he's someone that can turn a game on its head in an instance. And you've seen that last year, even say against Waterford when he came on. He banged in 2 goals in quick succession. So what an addition he has. And Ronan Glennon, his first year on the squad, has made a huge impression. Very unfortunate to get an injury, but a player that was playing at the top of his game with a lot of confidence. So it's great to have them, but that's what you need. And look, you can see it in both codes, the hurling, the football. The game has really expanded over recent years that you need 20 players, 21 players. You need lads to come in and finish the games and close it out. And that's why there's such an importance on the squad and having that depth in the squad. And it's great that those boys are there and hopefully will come in and make a big contribution. But equally, when you look at Kilkenny and the squad that they have, they have quality and depth as well. And I would say, coming into the game and even in the last game, in my head, and this is my view, that, if you're looking at the top 12, 13 players, it's Galway. If you're looking at the top 20, 21 players, Kilkenny would probably edge it in having that more quality and experience in the squad. So, it's just going to be a cracking game because, look, when Galway play Kilkenny, or when Kilkenny, the games take a life of their own. They're really close. I expect the exact same again this weekend. You have the whole Henry Brian Cody factor on top of it, but it's going to be an absolute cracker. They will not want to lose the Leinster final to Galway.
Cody will not want to lose because this could be Shefflin's chance to write the epitaph. If he beats Kilkenny, he sends them down the path of Cork and Limerick on that side of the draw.
Yeah.
And, win, and you're going to avoid Limerick until an All-Ireland final, most probably, if they win the final.
Yeah.
So I think Cody realises what's at stake.
No, big time. But that's what's really, really important, and particularly from a Galway perspective, it's brilliant to be in Leinster because you're getting games, but you're very much in the in the psyche of right now, like winning the Leinster title gives you the easier pathway. You're straight into the semi-final. You have a bit longer you've a couple of weeks to prepare for it again, so you can come down and come back up again, and you can have a good block of training again. Whereas if you lose, you're into the qualifiers or into having a quarter final, and then having Limerick in a semi-final. It's not insurmountable, but it's just a tougher challenge, and you're coming game on game and game, so you just want to go the handiest possible route, and that's the winning the Leinster and going straight into the semi.
Micheal, as ever, great to talk to you. Thanks a million. And
the only handshake you'll have, Micheal, on Saturday evening will be at 7 o'clock with myself and Niall up in the commentary box. You won't be shaking hands with anyone else. We'll have it live here on Galway Bay.
And I tell you one thing, Micheal, a Turlock Moore handshake at the best of times.
I know them well, Ollie.
Give me Brian Cody any day. See you, Micheal. Thanks a million for chatting to us. Look, it is late. It's not ideal. Young kids, as Micheal alluded to as well, but at the same time, you're going up there to see your heroes in the best stadium in Europe. I hope there is a crowd. I hope there's an atmosphere. I hope there's an intensity, a bit like 2012, where Galway can go out and just blitz Kilkenny and not leave them any room to come back. But the big question here is, Sean, this is part 2. Whatever happens, could there possibly be a part 3?
Well, you see, if you stay going, there could be. But look at it, I think for Galway right now, it's the only game in town. And as Micheal has outlined there in the last few minutes, the prize is a big one. Even if you're beaten, it's not insurmountable. If you remember the quarter-final, was it in 20? Galway were beaten by Kilkenny under Shane O'Neill and had to go out the following week against Tipperary. Whereas at least this time you have a second week. But if you were beaten, you need a bit of time to come down, get lads back up again. So look, the victory here is huge, and I think that's what everyone is really looking for.
It'll be very interesting at 8:30 to see what kind of a handshake will be going on between those two boys. Either way, we'll be there live, and next week we're going to be looking back on that Leinster hurling final and looking ahead as well to the Club Hurling Championship draw, which will be taking place the following Monday. The Football Club Championship draws, that's on next Monday night, the Bank Holiday Monday, as part of Comórtas Penla Gaeltachta. So we'll throw our eyes over the Football Club Championship draw coming up.
Final, of course,
and of course, we've got the Connacht Minor Football final coming up on Bank Holiday Monday as well. So plenty more to look forward to in Gaelic games for the month of June. But that's it from myself, Ollie Turner, and from Sean Welch. We'll chat to you next.
Over the Line Extra, your weekly Galway GAA podcast with Ollie Turner and Sean Walsh.